Dear ladies and gentlemen, heartily welcome from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. I wish you a good morning to Austria, as well as a happy afternoon to Southeast Asia. Due to the fact that we have most of our speakers who are non-German speaking and also quite a lot of people in the audience, please accept that we will do this webinar addressed to the Austrian companies, nevertheless in English. Before we start with the presentations, I just would like to highlight some things. First of all, this webinar will be recorded, and with pleasure we will share the YouTube link with you later on, that you can re-watch or share this webinar with others. And yeah, you will also receive the PDF presentation shared, that you can download it after the event. If you have any questions, please feel free to post these questions in the Q&A box. We will have an own Q&A session at the end of the webinar, where we can address your questions, your comments. Yes, without further ado, I would like to hand over now to my key account manager, Jennifer Tang, who will moderate today's webinar. Please, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. So we will begin with our Renewable Energy in Southeast Asia webinar with a presentation from the ASEAN Center of Energy with Ms. Rika Safrina. So Ms. Rika is a technical officer in the ASEAN Center of Energy under the Department of Energy Modeling and Policy Planning. She performs research and data analysis related to energy policy, digitalization, and climate change in ASEAN, and is one of the authors of ACE Quarterly and Energy Insight publications. So without further ado, please go ahead, Ms. Rika.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Indonesia. I am Rika Safrina, Energy Modeling and Policy Planning Officer from the ASEAN Center for Energy. On this occasion, I would like to talk about the RE target, outlook, and challenges in ASEAN. Okay. First of all, let me introduce our institution. The ASEAN Center for Energy, or ACE, is an intergovernmental organization that works closely and directly with the governments of Southeast Asia in the energy sector. ASEAN comprises 10 member states, including Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand. ACE has 3 key roles, which are catalyst, knowledge hub, and think tank. As a catalyst, ACE strengthens ASEAN energy cooperation by providing platforms for policy advisory, best practices, and capacity building. And as a knowledge hub, ACE provides a knowledge repository and services through data management, publication, and dissemination. Lastly, as a think tank, ACE identifies innovative solutions for ASEAN's energy challenges on policies, technologies, and regulatory frameworks. We are very open for energy project collaboration targeting all or any ASEAN member states. So this is the outlines for my presentation. We will look at the RE targets, RE outlook, followed by challenges and opportunities. Sorry for the background sound. Okay, so the regional RE target is written in this official document called ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APEC. This is a series of guiding policy documents to support the implementation of ASEAN energy cooperation. In the latest blueprint, ASEAN aims to increase the regional RE share to 23% of total primary energy supply, or TPS, and 35% share of RE in power capacity by 2025. Aside from RE, there is also a regional target in energy efficiency, which is 32% reduction of energy intensity. So that was the goal. Now, how much is the current RE share in ASEAN? This is the ASEAN power capacity. As you can see in the chart on the left side, coal and gas are rising from 2005 to 2020. but the RE share, the one in the blue line, keeps increasing too, with the majority in hydropower. The RE share in 2020 is 33.5%, only 1.5% remaining from 2025 target. If we look at the country by country, the one on the chart on the right side, Laos PDR has the largest RE share in ASEAN power capacity in 2020, followed by Vietnam and Cambodia. That was RE share in electricity. However, in terms of TPES, which include other sectors such as transport, industry, and residential, ASEAN is still far from its 23% target. The left chart shows that fossil fuels are still dominant in ASEAN energy mix from 2005 until 2019. And the right side here, we can see that oil share keeps decreasing, but it's still the largest share in ASEAN energy mix. Meanwhile, the RE share, the one in blue, is 13.94%, almost 10% remaining from 2025 target. Biomass and geothermal become the main contributors for RE share in ASEAN. In the latest energy outlook published last year, we projected ASEAN energy mix until the year 2040 with several scenarios. On the baseline scenario, the one which orange, which means it's business as usual without any policy intervention. The RE share in 2025 is projected to be 13.6%. Meanwhile, for APS scenario, accounts for national targets and existing RE policies, the projected RE share in 2025 is 17.7%, still far from the regional target. So therefore, in order to reach the regional target, ASEAN must fill the gaps with more ambitious RE implementation. So this is actually a big opportunity for private sectors in RE entering ASEAN markets to help achieve the 23% RE share by 2025. So each ASEAN country has a different target. Malaysia, for example, is very much known for its oil and gas production, but its RE industry, particularly biofuels, solar, and hydropower, will continue to diversify its energy mix. Meanwhile, the Philippines has huge geothermal potential, where its geothermal power plants supply around 44% of RE power in 2017. And lastly, Vietnam has risen to the top in terms of RE share in ASEAN with recent developments of hydro, solar, and wind. However, as we seen in the previous slide, even with all the ASEAN countries fulfilling their national targets, the regional RE share still not reached 23% in 2025. Why ASEAN have difficulties in increasing its RE share? So there are a lot of challenges here. First, as I mentioned before, each country develops its own development plans and targets independently. So they need to ensure that objectives are shared across ministries and other energy stakeholders. Secondly, ASEAN economies have not turned away yet from fossil fuels. In ASEAN, the use of coal is still increasing, even is expected to do so until 2040. However, the outlook for coal is slowly shifting because of public resistance to fossil fuels as population becomes more environmentally concerned. Thirdly, renewables are still costly in ASEAN. Even though the cost of solar and wind installations in the region are becoming competitive with fossil fuels, but they remain higher compared to global average. ASEAN countries have not yet developed the same level of technical and financial capacities that was seen in the world's most competitive markets. However, with the adoption of more sophisticated financial models, the other challenge is infrastructure. While the cost of installing solar and wind might fall below the cost of new fossil fuel power plants, but the grid infrastructure throughout the region continues to be a major limiting factors for the expansion of variable renewable energy. So an increased investment in cross-border grids and battery storage system are very crucial, should be priorities. Another challenge is the geographic features for some countries. Finding large land to build wind and solar farm is increasingly difficult. To overcome these technical and economic challenges, distributed demand centers could be one of the solutions. And finally, financial constraints. RE projects are capital intensive. So in order to assure continued progress, we need to attract diverse financing to the renewable sectors with bankable projects. Despite all these challenges, there are many opportunities for RE in ASEAN, especially due to global initiatives on Paris Agreement and Net Zero. Since we are still in the euphoria of COP26 that just finished last weekend, ASEAN countries have recently updated their National Determined Contribution, or NDC, right before COP26 with a more ambitious emissions reduction target. In addition, following other Asian countries like China, Japan, South Korea, several ASEAN countries already stated their net zero target. For example, Singapore pledged to be carbon neutral in the second half of the century, Malaysia and Vietnam both in 2050. So this surely brings opportunities for development of RE in the region. I think that's all from me. If you like to read our works or collaborate with us, please visit our website in ASEANenergy.org. Thank you very much, and back to you, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rika, for that very interesting overview of ASEAN renewable energy. And now we will move on to Malaysia with Mr. Ibrahim Arifin, who is the Director Energy Analyst of the Strategic Planning Division of Sustainable Energy Development Authority Malaysia, SEDA. His role involves advisory on areas aimed to facilitate the growth of Malaysia's renewable energy industry. Prior to SEDA, Ibrahim was a senior grid planning engineer at Tenaga Nasional Berhad, where his experience in managing the integration of RE projects into the national grid system and provides exposure to the governance, technical, commercial aspects of existing renewable energy mechanisms in Malaysia. Over to you, Mr. Ibrahim.
Thank you, Ms. Jennifer. Assalamualaikum and good morning. And if I may say guten Tag, if I get it right, that means good afternoon in Austrian. I'm Ibrahim Arifin, and thank you for the introduction just now, Ms. Jennifer. So next, I will be presenting about the renewable energy landscape in Malaysia. Okay, so as per introduction, SEDA Malaysia, or in long we call it Sustainable Energy Development Authority Malaysia, we have been established on the September 2011, and we are the statutory body under the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Just to mention, the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, mainly their main jurisdiction is to manage the electricity supply industry, and in particular, all generating resources will goes under the jurisdiction of this ministry. So we are the statutory body under this ministry with this list of following of these functions. But mainly, our main role is to drive any matter related to sustainable energy that governs both the renewable energy and also the energy efficiency itself. So being located in the equator, Malaysia is blessed with a lot of renewable energy potentials that include, I would say that these are the four main resources that have been explored: solar PV, large hydro potentials, bioenergy, and under the bioenergy, it is mainly on the biomass and also the biogas. With regards to the bioenergy itself, I would say that Malaysia being one of the main exporter of palm oil, we also have abundance of palm oil mills in Malaysia, and hence we also have a lot of potentials with regards to the byproducts of the palm oil productions, namely the empty fruit bunch and also the pomade. And on top of that, under the biomass capacity, we also identify the potentials for waste to energy. And this currently in Malaysia, we have also allocated about 320 megawatt in total of waste to energy potentials by 2025. And aside from that, we also have a very site-specific on geothermal potentials, mainly in the two areas. One of the state in Malaysia, Sabah, have about 67 megawatt of potentials of geothermal. And in Perak, in the region of Peninsular Malaysia, we have another 162 megawatt potentials. Currently, we have conducted a few feasibility studies and the potentials are being there. And we are exploring further to how we can best deploy these projects, especially post 2025. So if you can see if we take a step back, that the total electricity demand in Malaysia currently for all Peninsula Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak is roughly about 25 gigawatt at the moment. So if we can see the potential itself, for example, like the solar itself, it is not something impossible for Malaysia to go for RE 100%. But however, if we're looking at the solar PV potentials, this include the potentials for the rooftop markets and also the ground mounted and as well the floating solar potentials. So you can see the numbers, these have a quite big potentials, 270 gigawatt of capacity. But however, towards developing and harnessing the RE resources that are available in Malaysia, we are to take this consideration of the energy trilemma. If you can refer to the triangle parts of on my top right side, on the top right of the slides, that covers the environmental targets, the affordability, and also the system stability. If I may take a little bit elaboration on this, with regards to the environmental targets, for Malaysia under the Paris Agreement 2015, we are committed to reduce our carbon intensity by 45% in 2030. So, and the power sector in particular identified as one of the most contributed to the carbon emissions. The power sector itself is currently planning to go for beyond this target, in which we are trying to decarbonize the power sector to 45% reduction by 2030 and also 60% by 2035. So currently we have a long-term planning for the renewable energy growth in Malaysia. And moving forward, we are trying to at best deliver our commitments under the Paris Agreement as well. And just recently, in September, our new Prime Minister also has announced that Malaysia is also committed to go for the carbon neutral initiative. So in view of the commitment for the carbon neutral, I would say that whatever current targets that we have might be reviewed in the year after. So on the second thing, on the affordability, like if we base on the information that we received, benchmarking with the region and also the global scales, we can say that Malaysia has one of the countries that offer a relatively cheap electricity while maintaining a good reliability of the electricity supply. So as much as possible, the growth of renewable energy is we will not try to make the affordability compromise. And of course, the third item is the utmost important, which is the system stability itself. As mentioned also that the current electricity supply in Malaysia is ranking quite second in ASEAN, for example. And as much as possible, the potentials for the variable renewable energy in Malaysia context, I would say, is solar. We'll try to develop in tandem with the securing the system stability itself. So at the moment, for the solar penetration itself, we have conducted an internal study that we determined that to avoid the condition of the duck curve, if everyone in the same page about the duck curve, these are one of the areas that we try to avoid, and to ensure that we did not come into the duck curve dilemma, we are currently limiting the solar penetration to 24% of the maximum demand of the day. So next, these are the key strategies with regards to the how we want to deploy our renewable energy and grow the renewable energy in Malaysia. The first one is to shift away from coal. For example, like in Peninsula Malaysia, at the moment, I would say it's 50% of the capacity coming from the coal. And this is also one of the reasons being that Malaysia is able to deliver relatively cheap electricity, because about 50% of our energy mix coming from coal itself. So the commitment made by the giant players of coal players in Malaysia, one of them is the national utility, Tenaga Nasional Berhad, also have announced that they will no longer participate in any new coal projects. And currently, under the regulated market of Malaysia, all the coal plants, which is currently based on the power purchase agreement, it will end the operations once the PPA is concluded. So these are the first key is to shift away from coal and to include more natural gas and also renewable energy. And next is on the optimized renewables, as mentioned earlier, to ensure the system stability can be maintained. we try to balance out and provide good opportunities for all sectors with regards to the solar new capacity and also the non-variable renewables that include the bioenergy and also the the development of hydro potentials. And the last one is on the maintain system stability. Under this initiative, we also try to maintain the good amount of reserve margins to make sure the operations can be maintained at higher security. And we are to also make sure that the long-term plant up or the generation plant up will also have a sufficient spinning reserve. And on top of that, as mentioned, to address the intermittency issue from the higher introduction of solar capacity in Malaysia, we are to also explore the potential for battery storage. So with regards to the battery storage itself, currently we are conducting some study to determine the right specifications, the right needs for the energy storage to be integrated to the grid to manage the concerns from the solar penetration. Next, with regards to the RE journey, 2021 also marks the 20th journey of Malaysia embarking on renewable energy journey. Starting from 2001, we have established this one program that is called Small Renewable Energy Power, or in short, we call it SREP. And in this SREP, the main resources that we explore are the bioenergy and also the small hydro. But however, during this time, the technology are considerably quite expensive compared to the other generating resources that mostly are from coal or natural gas. And after a decade of implementation of this program, only about 60 megawatt of renewable energy capacity has been realized and be in operations. So lesson learned from these programs, the ministry alongside with regulators and utilities, we have worked together to establish this feed-in tariff mechanism. So the feed-in tariff was introduced in 2011, and hence the establishment of SEDA Malaysia also to monitor and implement the feed-in tariff mechanism in Malaysia. So in 2011, when the feed-in tariff mechanism started introduced, mainly the four resources that we exploit are the solar capacity, biomass, biogas, and also small hydro. And in 2014, after conducting the potentials for geothermal, we have also included the geothermal capacity also under the feed-in tariff mechanism. In my later slides, I will elaborate more with regards to these four mechanisms, the feed-in tariff, and I also mentioned post-2016, we have also introduced another three programs, the Largescale Solar, Net Energy Metering, and also Celco. And these three items mainly focusing on the solar technology itself. So in my later slides, I will elaborate more in terms of these four programs. So moving forward, that up to December 2020, we have managed to realize 8.4 gigawatt of capacity in operations coming from renewable energy, and this come up to 24% of Malaysia capacity mix. So moving forward, that we have aimed for a higher target, 31% by 2025, which accumulate to 13 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity, and 40% in 2035. And this also the 40% in market about 18 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. So from where we are today and until the 2035 targets, we are about 10 gigawatt of capacity that we are trying to explore and to be put in operations by 2035. So as mentioned earlier during my introduction also, these targets is also in line with the decarbonization target from the power sector to reduce 60% of the carbon intensity by 2035. So just to mention that this is also a new target for Malaysia. This just revised this year. Compared to previously, we are only aiming for 20% of renewable energy by 2025. So looking at the current progress that we have, and also the agreement to include large hydro as part of the capacity mix, we are able to increase our targets to a higher target, which is the 31% and 40% respectively. So for a document reference, you may refer to this programs, which is the National Renewable Energy Policy and Action Plan. This is currently the guiding policy in Malaysia with regards to the development of renewable energy. But at the moment, ourselves is currently finalizing this one new document, which is called the Malaysia Renewable Energy Roadmap, to highlight in terms of the prospect of renewable energy in Malaysia. we are planning to launch this new Malaysia Renewable Energy Roadmap by year end. So next, these are the two programs managed by us, SEDA Malaysia, the feed-in tariff and also the net energy metering. If I may go on the feed-in tariff first, was begun in 2011, and the mechanism is basically managed by this one, what we call the RE fund. And this RE fund is contributed by all the publics from the electricity bills. We have a charge of 1.6%, in which will be channeled into this RE fund. And from this RE fund that we managed to provide the premium tariff under the feed-in tariff program. So as mentioned, that also under this mechanism, we are exploring these 5 potentials. And for solar capacity itself, the quota was fully taken up in 2016. And the other 3 programs, net energy metering, large-scale solar, and also the Celco, has taken up the PV projects. So moving forward, that we conduct our annual e-bidding exercise. Recently, we also just concluded one of the e-bidding exercise this year that covers the capacity from biogas, biomass, and also small hydro. And next, we also have a sub-allocation for My Surya programs. The Surya is actually the sun in Malay. And I would say that the My Surya is mainly to cover for the lower income community to provide them some monthly commitments. So with regards to the commercial arrangement under the feed-in tariff, it is under the power purchase agreement, and usually the term is within 16 to 21 years.
Mr. Ibrahim, please think of your time, not to keep too long, please.
Okay, I will wrap it up in 3 minutes. So next on the net energy metering, introduced 2016, and until today we have on the 3rd phase of this program, NEM 3.0 recently was launched in February 2021, and until today the quota is still available. This is mainly aiming for a smaller scale of solar capacity, and we have categorized it into 3 sectors, which the first one is for the domestic sector, for the government buildings, and also a dedicated category for commercial and industrial sector. Next, on the large-scale solar. Large-scale solar is managed by Suruhanjaya Tenaga Energy Commissions. Begins in 2016, and until today, 4 cycles of the bidding exercise has been completed. 92 projects with the capacity of 2.5 gigawatt have been awarded, and under this mechanism is also binded by the power purchase agreement for 21 years. And the next is Celco. This, as per the name, is mainly to drive for the business sustainability with regards to the energy savings realized from the installation of solar, and this is mainly just for self-consumptions. Was introduced in 2017, and this is based on open applications any time of the year. So this just a little bit touch on term of this other mechanism introduced. This is more or less I believe in EU markets. This is something like the spot market, in which the price is not fixed throughout the terms. They need to based on the system marginal price, in which it will be revised for every 30 minutes. It is called the new enhanced dispatching arrangement. It is not limited for renewable energy only. Any type of generation resources can also apply under this mechanism, but in particular, there are also rooms for renewable energy projects to be implemented under this initiative. So moving forward, these are the capacity that has been realized until December 2020. So if you can see that currently the main dominating RE resources is hydro. Next are the solar, and the following are the bioenergy and also the small hydro. But looking at the plan we have up until 2035, solar and hydro will be the 2 resources that contribute most to the RE capacity mix in Malaysia. So moving forwards, I would say that we are under the regulated market of Malaysia. We are currently implementing the existing business model like the net energy metering and also the large-scale solar under the PPA. But moving forward, we are also currently exploring the corporate PPAs, P2P, and also the REC. So these are incentives available in Malaysia. We have a dedicated Green Technology Financing Scheme 3.0 recently was launched and is open for application up until 31 December, in which we are able to provide a certain financing, dedicated financing scheme for energy efficiency and also renewable energy technology. And also another thing is on the tax exemption tax allowance under another statutory body under the ministry, which is the MIDA, Malaysia Investment Development Authority. So anyway, for the foreign investors that interested to invest in Malaysia, we are able to customize a specific scheme to facilitate the interest of the entities that willing to invest in Malaysia. So this there's some photos. Maybe I can skip these photos. This just to show a bit of the project that already in operation in Malaysia. Rooftop solar, large hydro, Bakul Sarawak. This is the largest hydroelectricity plant in Malaysia in Sarawak. And we also have some off-grid projects to support the rural electrifications. And this is mostly done by the under the corporate social responsibility of the national utility. This will be my concluding slides. I would say that we have a positive outlook of RE growth in Malaysia, and based on our estimations, we are estimated roughly about 20 billion of investment required in Malaysia ringgits towards realizing our 2025 targets, and another about 30 billions from the 2026 until 2035 targets. And this also able to create job opportunities, abundance of job opportunities, roughly about 30,000 in delivering our commitments by 2035. So thank you. And this is my contact information. Feel free to contact me after the sessions if you would like to understand more in terms of the renewable energy market in Malaysia. Thank you, and I hand back to Ms. Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim. Very informative about the Malaysian market. We will now move on to the Philippines, where we have Attorney Mona Lisa Di Malanta, who is one of the 6 distinguished representatives in the 2020 Renewables Asia Award, honoring a select group of women in Asia Pacific for their contribution to the promotion of renewable energy in the region. Mona was also the former chairperson of the Philippine National Renewable Energy Board, during which she steered the board to fulfilling its mandate under the Renewable Energy Act, also reviewing and updating the Philippines 20-year National Renewable Energy Program. As of this year, she has resumed working full-time as a senior partner of PJS Law. Please go ahead, Ms. Mona Lisa.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po, as we say in the Philippines. And thank you for Advantage Austria for this invitation, for this opportunity to present the opportunities in the Philippines in the renewable energy space. Trying to navigate the slide, but maybe you can, okay, there. So for this afternoon, we'll look into the Philippine story for energy. In particular, what I wanted to share with you is that the journey to renewable energy is not new for the Philippines. In fact, we started our industry built on renewable energy back in the 1930s. And the mandate of the National Power Corporation, which was the state agency or the state corporation established in the 1930s, was first to explore the hydropower resources of the country, and then it was expanded to explore the geothermal resources. It was mentioned by our colleague from the ASEAN Center of Energy earlier that the Philippines is very rich in geothermal resources. It continues to be to this date. In fact, up until recently, we were second only to the United States in terms of utilizing geothermal for power generation. We're now down to the third place, but we want to get back and explore more of our geothermal resources. It was in the 1990s when the sector was open to private sector participation with what we call the BOT law, or the Build, Operate, Transfer law in the Philippines, and that's when IPPs came into the picture. The government signed up several power purchase agreements, including large coal power generation projects came in. And I highlighted in the slide 3 particular laws which are sort of milestones in our journey, in our energy journey. First, the creation of the Department of Energy in 1992, where the mandate was really to explore the indigenous resources in the country. in 2001, and this is quite important, maybe something that distinguishes us from our neighbors in ASEAN. In 2001, the industry was deregulated. Power generation in particular was deregulated. There was a mandate of privatization that was put in place by the national government. The national government actually step back from investing in power generation. And what did that lead? What did that result in? We started growing the capacity in the sector, but most of it came from non-renewable energy sources. That's why in 2008, shortly after, just 7 years after the law that deregulated the sector, we passed in the Philippines the what we call the Renewable Energy Act. Quite interesting because our renewable energy journey, as I mentioned earlier, started decades ago. So what was the point of passing a Renewable Energy Act, the statute that was focused on renewable energy? The main point of the Renewable Energy Act was really to accelerate the growth of renewable energy coming from emerging technologies. As mentioned earlier, the share of RE came from primarily large hydropower resources and geothermal resources at that point. So there was at that in 2008, as we all know, I think there were a lot of new technologies, particularly for solar and wind, that we needed to tap, open to investors, and really accelerate the growth or utilization of renewable in our energy industry. So what happened in EPIRA? What does that mean? EPIRA is the law that was passed in 2001. I included this slide because I think it would be helpful for those who are not familiar with the Philippine energy sector to appreciate that the market is now, as I mentioned, deregulated and quite competitive for the generation side. As I'm sharing in the slide, you can see that as of September 2020, there are already almost 300 players in the generation side. We also have a central dispatch wholesale electricity spot market that has been in operation since 2006, and it's an offer-based market where generators must offer all their capacity in the market, and that's where central dispatch takes place. There are bilateral contracts that are entered into by players, by generators, with contestable customers, which are large customers. They can already contract on their own. Generators can also enter into long-term bilateral contracts with distribution utilities, but they all have to offer their capacity in the market. The payment, though, can be settled off the market, or what we call net off the market. It's a contractual settlement of the amounts as the parties have contracted or have agreed in their contract. They're all dispatched via our system operator. There's a singular system operator for the grids. The large grids are the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Those are our three main islands. The transmission and the distribution sectors remain to be regulated by our Energy Regulatory Commission, meaning they cannot simply pass on rates. Their charges are regulated, are approved by the regulator. Their performance are monitored by the regulator. They operate under what we call a performance-based regime, or PBR. But this is how active the market is. Just to give you an idea of the participants in this market. I mentioned earlier these three laws that are sort of the underpinnings of the current system in the Philippines. But this, I think, is what we can focus on. The Philippines had set a 35% target for renewable energy share in energy, not in capacity terms, but in energy terms, by 2030. How do we envision to get there? There is what we call a Renewable Portfolio Standard, RPS program, that's under the Renewable Energy Act. It requires all the distribution utilities, you saw that in the slide earlier, all the distribution utilities and all the retail suppliers to source a certain percentage of their supply from renewable energy sources. Currently, that number is at 1%, but as I will show earlier, as I will show later, we are aiming to increase that by next year. Actually, no, not next year, but by 2023, we are increasing the 1% target so that we get to 35% by 2030. What are the other programs in the RE Act or in the Renewable Energy Act of 2008? I think some of these items are familiar to you as presented by our colleague from Malaysia as well. We have the feed-in tariff system that was in place in 2012 to 2014. It continues to be in place. There are still capacities available for subscription under the feed-in tariff program, but the only remaining capacities are just about 100 megawatts for run-of-river hydro. All the capacities for solar, wind, and biomass have been fully subscribed, meaning the feed-in tariff rates have already been allocated to the first movers in this program. We also have a net metering program that has been in place since 2014. It's implemented on what we call the on-grid areas, the large areas in the Philippines. But the uptake has been quite slow, I must admit. We only have less than 4,000 participants in the entire country as of the end of last year. That's quite low, considering that the Philippines is also rich in solar resources. We have, as I mentioned earlier, the RPS program, or the Renewable Portfolio Standard, that works hand in hand with what we call the RE market, which is the platform for trading of renewable energy certificates. So each megawatt hour of RE that's generated is issued one RE certificate that can be traded in this RE market. This year, 2021, is actually the first year of implementation of the RPS program and the first year of trial operations of the RE market. Together with that is what we want to launch by the end of this year, which is what we call the Green Energy Auction. While we no longer have the feed-in tariff program, the Green Energy Auction is another way to jumpstart investment in the sector. We also have what we call a voluntary market, which is the Green Energy Option Program. This is where consumers that register about 250 kilowatt average consumption can start contracting for their own RE supplier. So just as what we have generally in the system, where we have contestable customers or large customers can contract for their own supply, Green Energy Option is another subset. It's a subset of that program. It has a lower threshold, as I mentioned, 250 kilowatt. In the general market, I think the threshold is currently at 500 kilowatt. So customers can already exercise their power of choice in choosing renewable energy for their own supply. The Philippines, as I think some of you are familiar, is an archipelago. We have a lot of islands, small islands that are not connected to the main grid. So to address that, and a lot of the small islands still need to be electrified. They have very low electrification rates, or if they have electrification systems, they're not 24/7, or they are using non-renewable energy resources. Particularly, they are powered mainly by diesel gensets, diesel generators. So the goal of the RE Act is also by having off-grid programs, so programs for off-grid electrification using renewable energy. There are cash incentives for developers who will go into missionary electrification and substitute what I have included here in the slide, 95% oil-based capacity. That's a huge market for off-grid electrification that can be substituted by renewable energy. There is also a version of the RPS, of the Renewable Portfolio Standard, that will be implemented in the off-grid program that's currently being refined and will be implemented next year. Okay. Aside from those two main buckets of on-grid and off-grid programs, in the National Renewable Energy Program, I mentioned earlier that we worked on when I was still at the National Renewable Energy Board, we came up with a 20-year program for the promotion of renewable energy in the Philippines. We called it the Philippine Energy Agenda. And it's not just about energy transition, because for the Philippines, I think, as I showed you earlier, since we started off with renewable energy, it's really less of a transition, but a return to our journey, going back to where we started, going back to our roots. So we came up with a holistic program. I will not go into all of the details for that, but maybe just to share with you 3 pillars of that Philippine RE agenda. First is the mandatory programs. I shared with you earlier the RPS and the Green Energy Auction Program. We have also voluntary programs, what we call the net metering, and the GEOP, the Green Energy Option Program. They're all consumer-initiated programs, and what we call the transition enablers. I'm glad that our colleague from the ASEAN Center of Energy mentioned the challenge for promoting renewable energy, which is really the grid readiness to take on all the renewable energy potential in our respective countries. And that's the main challenge, I think, that we have in the Philippines. The resource is there, but will the grid be able to take this on? So 2 years ago, the Department of Energy, together with the US National Renewable Energy Lab, came up with a report called the Competitive RE Zones Report, or CREZ report. They have identified 25 RE-rich zones in the country, and the requirement that's needed for the grid to take on the resource that are going to be developed in these areas. I can share. Unfortunately, I was not able to update the slide and put on that link, but I can share the link later for that report. It's available publicly, and it's a good if you're interested, and I hope you are interested in looking into investment opportunity in the Philippines. I think it's good to look at that report as a starting point, because it already identifies the areas that are rich in resources and the status of the grid in terms of taking on the resource. Okay, the next couple of slides are details as to these programs. I can perhaps maybe just leave at this or end with this particular slide, because I wanted to share with you that the RPS program, the mandatory program, that's currently requiring 1% of RE to be sourced from RE supplier, will increase in 2023 to 2.52. That's market opener for those who are interested to invest in RE. We anticipate that the requirement of the grid is more than 5 gigawatts to meet that 2.52 requirement by 2023. So there is this huge potential in the Philippines. I think the slides can be shared with the participants, and if you have questions during the Q&A later, I can address your questions. Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity again. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mona Lisa. Very interesting policies in Philippines. And now we will move on to Vietnam with Mr. Nguyen Tan Hai, who is Special Counsel at Baker McKenzie Vietnam and specializes in legal and regulatory advice relating to power, energy, and infrastructure projects. So he's active in the renewable space and has advised on legal due diligence, M&A transactions, licensing, development, and operation of many renewable energy projects across different provinces at different stages. He's also been active in regulatory programs in addressing regulatory and contractual improvements and amendments to the Vietnamese laws and regulations on renewable energy, climate change, environment, clean technologies, and energy efficiency, among others. So please, Mr. Hai, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jennifer. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next some minutes, I will be speaking about Vietnam's situation for renewable energy framework, policy, and incentive. Yeah, so on the agenda, I will be speaking on the current situation, framework, and incentive for renewable in Vietnam, and as well as the new master planning and potential policy mechanism for Vietnam, going forward. Okay, I think I can start off first to discuss about Vietnam energy mix. So in terms of the whole energy mix, right now in Vietnam we have over 75 gigawatt installed capacity in total, and Vietnam is now one of the largest power market in ASEAN region. Renewable energy obviously plays an important part in this development, particularly for solar and wind have developed rapidly in Vietnam in the past 3 years. Since 2019, solar power project attract significant investment to the, as you may know, the first feed-in tariff and second feed-in tariff program for solar farm and rooftop solar. By the end of 2020, over 16 gigawatt installed capacity of solar farm and rooftop solar for sale to EVN as the state utility have achieved commercial operation, accounting for 21% or so of the total energy mix. For wind, more recently, as you may heard, with the wind feed program with a COD deadline by October 2021, this month Vietnam have a total 84 wind farm project achieved the feed deadline in whole in past, with nearly addition 4 gigawatt installed capacity. So I will be speaking about the more development about wind market in the next slide later. But so far we can see that Vietnam is considered one of the most attractive energy market in the region. Other than solar and wind, Vietnam also have a great potential for small hydro, biomass, for which I will also discuss in more detail in the next slide. Let's now move on to the update on specific energy sources in Vietnam. First, I will be speaking about solar in order to scale up the development of renewable energy. In Vietnam. Since 1920, Vietnam approved an attractive feed-in tariff first program, which, as you can see here, the tariff 9.35 cents per kilowatt hour applicable for 20 years PPA for solar farm have achieved the commercial operation before June 2019. After that, Vietnam continue to apply revised FIT 2 for certain solar farm, having achieved the COD by the end of 2020. So, as you can see here, the tariff for grid-connected floating solar farm with 9.69 cents per kilowatt hour, or for ground-mounted solar farm 7.09 cents per kilowatt hour, and rooftop solar 8.38 cents per kilowatt hour. So for those projects achieve the required COD, then this feed-in tariff apply for 20-year PPA contract. So this is the strategy for government on how to attract private investment in the renewable energy sector. So with those incentives, Vietnam now have a total installed capacity for operating FIT 1 and FIT 2 solar farm over 8.6 gigawatt. For operating solar rooftop solar system, mostly under FIT 2 program in 2020, then there have been another 7.7 gigawatt installed capacity. In addition, at Vietnam promote for rooftop solar installation for on-site rooftop solar system, then there have been quite a significant amount of corporate PPA transaction for commercial and industrial company being power consumer, installing or operating rooftop solar system on the roof for self-consumption. So Vietnam continue promoting this kind of rooftop solar structure for on-site project. And with such a large amount of operating assets for solar farm and rooftop solar, then as you can see, Vietnam have a significant opportunity for foreign investor and player looking for brownfield investment, some of which at the portfolio level. Now I would like to move on to another technology, which is wind energy. In wind energy sector, Vietnam have tried to develop in the past 10 years or so with a feed-in tariff program. But Vietnam actually have really progressed in the wind sector since 2018, when Vietnam approved a new feed-in tariff for wind with the revised tariff. As you can see here, 8.5 cents for onshore wind and 9.8 cents for offshore wind project, with a COD deadline by the end of last month, October 2021. So under the wind feed program, Vietnam signed PPA with a total 146 wind projects, nearly 8 gigawatt. But so far, as you know, Vietnam, due to the difficulty during the COVID-19 period, then certain wind projects have been subject to certain delay. But at the end of the COD deadline last month, then Vietnam had a significant amount of projects coming to operation. As you can see here, we have about 4 gigawatt of 84 operating wind farm under the current wind program. And for wind, the COD between on a turbine by turbine basis. So certain wind farm only achieve a partial COD. But there's still certain projects they fail to achieve the COD deadline with a total capacity about 3.4 gigawatt. So for this project, the government of Vietnam now is considering working on a new mechanism to allow for direct negotiation with EVN on a revised tariff, or for earlier projects, they may be subject to reverse auction or bidding mechanism to agree on the tariff based on the bidding law of Vietnam. Now I would like to move on with another technology, which is biomass. And biomass in Vietnam, we also have a great potential. When we're talking about biomass in Vietnam, we see potential from different resources such as rice husk or rice straw, energy wood, coffee husk, or bagasse. These are the most active types of biomass used in Vietnam, particularly for bagasse from sugar mill for self-consumption, have been developed in Vietnam significantly. In March 2020, then the government of Vietnam, the Prime Minister, issued a decision to approve a tariff for biomass. As you can see here, for combined heat and power biomass project, then the feed-in tariff is 7.03 cents per kilowatt hour. They know deadline for COD for other types of biomass and project, then the tariff will be higher, 8.47 cents per kilowatt hour. Instead of avoiding cost tariff under the previous regulation. But compared to wind and solar, obviously biomass is less attractive. The main issue is due to the uncertainty to the supply arrangement, maybe due to the difficulty to secure bankable biomass supply agreement for biomass feedstock supplier. Then that is one of the issues. And as a result, in terms of biomass installed capacity, then so far we only have about 382 megawatt installed capacity of biomass power, but Vietnam still have a quite high potential for biomass. Now moving on to another type of renewable energy sources. Solid waste energy. Solid waste energy, Vietnam also have a high potential with more than 60,000 tons of domestic solid waste energy generated per day, and about 70% of the total amount of waste is treated by burial methods. So the Vietnam government also approved a similar feed-in tariff scheme for this kind of sources, solid waste to energy, with 10.05 cents per kilowatt hour for waste incineration, and also another tariff for 7.28 cents for combustion of landfill gases. This is the incentive for this sector. Moving on with another technology, we see small hydro. Small hydro in Vietnam, when we're talking about small hydro, we're talking about project. It have installed capacity of up to 30 megawatt project, and in Vietnam, for some small hydro up to 30 megawatt project, then we develop eligible for avoiding cost tariff mechanism. Now, in interest of time, I will be moving to discuss on the next mechanism for Vietnam for renewable energy. So, first, the important thing right now, Vietnam working on is the new National Power Development Plan number 8. So during last year, Vietnam have been developing the draft various versions for the PDPAs, and by this moment, it's still in the draft form. Last month, the MOIT, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, submit a new draft for Power Development Plan number 8 to the Prime Minister for review. And after that, following the recent COP26 conference with the Vietnam Climate Action Plan for and commitment to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050, then Vietnam continue to update the draft PDPAs on the basis that Vietnam will continue to following the message from the COP26. And for the target, as you can see here, this is the target for the under the current draft PDPAs. Let's talk about the target for by 2025. As you can see here, by 2025, the total installed capacity will be increased from about 75 gigawatt, as I mentioned earlier, in November 21 today, to up to about 105 gigawatt by 2025, and in which the solar will account for about 17%, while wind will account for 11%. Biomass and other renewable energy sources will add on a small portion of 1 gigawatt capacity in this period. During the period from 2025 to 2030, then the installed capacity will be increased up to about 143 gigawatt by 2030. Solar will account for about 50%, while wind will account for 9%. But the Vietnam renewable will be significantly developed for the period during the period from 2030 to 2045. The total capacity will be increased from current status to 329 gigawatt by 2045. So as you can see here, the solar capacity will be significantly increased, accounting for 90%. Wind will account about 20% of the total energy mix. And if you can, we're looking at the period before 2030, then we see that the increase in the current draft is not a big increase. but for a period from 2030 to 2040, then the solar capacity will significantly increase, about 21 gigawatt in 2030 to up to 63 gigawatt by 2045. So Vietnam have a vision to scale up both wind and solar. For wind, as you can see here, during this period after 2030, then the wind capacity will increase significantly from 12 gigawatt by 2030 to up to 68 gigawatt by 2045. Vietnam have a plan to develop large-scale offshore wind projects during this period. As I mentioned earlier, following the COP26 conference, then the private sector hoping that the government will adjust the draft PDPAs to add more capacity for renewable during 2021 to 2030. But we will see what the next draft coming out from the government.
Mr. Hai, please come to an end with your presentation. We are already over time. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I just want to have a final slide on the mechanism here. Vietnam have a long period of time for developing various mechanisms for renewable corporate PPA and renewable energy auction mechanism will be the upcoming mechanism for renewable in Vietnam. So in short of time, I will wrap up my discussion today. I believe that we will be sharing with you more detail about this mechanism at some point in the future. Thank you. Now I would like to hand over to Jennifer for the next session of the webinar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hai, for all the information on Vietnam. I also just want to say, yes, I'll keep it short as we've gone slightly over time. I think everyone is very passionate about this topic, so thank you all for your patience. I will now go into the trends and opportunities for Austrian companies in the sector. So we will start with Malaysia. So as Mr. Ibrahim already mentioned, many of these facts I would just like to highlight. Malaysia has greatly improved the renewable energy contribution to the energy mix ahead of schedule. So the initial target of 20% in 2025 has already been surpassed. We are at 24% now, and the target has been readjusted to 31%. One of the main key opportunities in the sector would be in solar, which is on the rise thanks to government support, investor confidence, and cost reductions. And also, as mentioned earlier, there are a lot of incentives in the sector and initiatives that are open to foreign bidders. Historically, the growth of the sector has been very high, 432% of installed capacity between 2014 to 2019. And we've also seen predictions by Fitch Solutions that it will continue to grow at a similar rate to reach 4 gigawatts by 2030. I would like to highlight hydrogen, notably in the state of Sarawak, which has set up a few hydrogen production plants, including a green hydrogen production plant. They also have hydrogen buses. And the government has also planned for a new national hydrogen technology economy roadmap, which will combine the different hydrogen initiatives from the different players in the country. This includes hydrogen energy from waste, which leads me to waste to energy potential, which is a big focus in Malaysia, as Malaysia has a waste problem, and waste to energy would be one of the methods to overcome this, as a lot of the municipal solid waste contains up to 50% of organic content, which could be repurposed to landfill gas or incinerated. There are plans for 6 new waste to energy plants from between now to 2025, and the tenders are ongoing, which would also be of interest to foreign companies. Finally, that would be energy storage. So while Malaysia has a fairly steady electricity supply now, the adoption of renewable energy would present new challenges, especially for solar. So there would be a need for energy storage solutions, which also includes for electric vehicles, as Malaysia seeks to increase the adoption of electric vehicles in the sector, which would then mean new opportunities for related energy providers and the infrastructure. Due to the importance of oil palm in Malaysia, there is also a very significant role for biofuels. And to wrap up, I would like to mention that the state of Penang will also be announcing a new renewable energy and energy efficiency framework by the end of this year. And for the Philippines, the Philippine government has updated its National Renewable Energy Program for 2020 to 2040. So although the full report has yet to be published, it sets the roadmap for achieving its renewable energy goals. So one of the main highlights is that the new targets are expected to account for more than half of the Philippines' power mix by 2040 for a total capacity target of over 30,000 megawatts, which is double the original target of 15,300 megawatts of installed capacity. So 11,000 megawatts target for solar is expected from awarded service contracts and committed indicative projects, including an expanded solar rooftop program and floating solar. Around 13,000 megawatts of additional capacities from hydropower are also expected to be in place, as there is a large untapped potential in this sector, inclusive of mini to large hydro. Meanwhile, there are ongoing studies for offshore wind development, and its capacity is likely to increase by over 1,300 megawatts in the planning period. And finally, waste to energy is a future priority, but is still awaiting policy issuance. So it's foreseen to be added into the energy system within the planning horizon. Next would be Vietnam. So the Power Development Plan is an ambitious master plan targeted at decarbonization and the increased use of renewables. Coal and hydro are the dominating sources for electricity production at the moment, but there is large investment planned and capacity for most renewable energy sources will increase. This will provide a lot of opportunities for the Austrian companies willing to engage in Vietnam. So up to now, several Austrian companies have been very successful in the direct supply of hydropower equipment for numerous projects of all scales in Vietnam. And we also see potential in supplies of products and know-how to wind parks and solar PV installations. So subcontracting is a keyword, as a lot of Austrian companies are specialized and will in most cases not be the main contractors, as there's a lot of competition between foreign companies. Finally, biomass is still a relatively small topic in Vietnam due to lack of available resources and regulatory problems, but pilot projects in waste to energy will have a good chance in Vietnam, and we expect greater growth and potential, greater potential and growth rates in the future. Next we move, I will just also cover other countries in the region which did not present today. So in Indonesia, the focus fields in the renewable energy sector, it will include micropower, as there's a shift to smaller projects like microturbines. There is also important biomass potential, as it would contribute to combat the waste and energy challenges in the country. Photovoltaics have a large potential that is only marginally used so far. And the same situation for wind energy. Geothermal energy has very high potential, especially due to the location of Indonesia in the Pacific Ring of Fire. Finally, we want to highlight that the Indonesian government is also planning a new capital city in Kalimantan on the island of Borneo, which will require a lot of smart city solutions and sustainability. So this would present a lot of opportunities for the Austrian companies. Currently, the project is on hold because of COVID-19, but is expected to continue after. And I will finish up with Thailand. So to reduce the dependence on imported fossil fuels, the Thai government has embarked on the latest Alternative Energy Development Plan and the Power Development Plan, both of 2015, where renewable energy is a key priority for innovation. The plan is to increase the share of renewable energy consumption from 12% to 30% by 2037, for an increase of up to 20,000 megawatts. Solar energy is particularly important, as it will go up from 2,800 megawatts to 10,000 megawatts. Thailand also has the world's largest floating hydro-solar hybrid project at Sirindom Dam, which is the first pilot project of 16 hydro-floating solar hybrid projects. So Sirindom contributes a capacity of 45 megawatts to the total capacity of the program's 2,725 megawatts. So biomass is also one of the main players in alternative energy because Thailand is an agriculture-based economy, and it comes mostly from solid waste of agricultural products, and of which there will be 80 million tons of agricultural waste annually. And finally, Thailand is also prioritizing power generation from both household and industrial waste. So I would just also now like to give a quick overview of future capacity potential that we see in the region. So you can take a look at the chart, and basically there's a large potential for solar energy, especially in Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand, but also hydro is one of the top sectors that we see in the region. And then I will just move on quickly to, this is an overview of the installed capacity of each sector in the region. So you can see again that solar has a very large potential, followed by hydro power. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation. Thank you very much. And I pass it to Reinhard. Oh, sorry, we are going to the Q&A session. So please, I see there's already some questions in the Q&A box. So we will begin. So for Mr. Ibrahim,
I also ask all the speakers to join us at the Q&A session, please. Yeah, Jennifer, please go ahead with the first question.
So the first question is for Mr. Ibrahim, which is, in Malaysia, can foreign companies participate in the LSS bidding on 100% foreign ownership basis?
Thank you, Jennifer, for the question. To ensure that the local players also have a fair opportunities to participate in the renewable energy industry, currently the framework for Malaysia context is that we only allow up to 49% of foreign shares in the particular projects. And another 51% is to have local partners.
Okay, thank you. We have a very similar question for the Philippines from the same person, which is, in the Philippines, biomass and geothermal are allowed 100% ownership by foreign investors. Do you see that solar and wind will follow, as it is now only allowed 40%?
Thank you. That's correct. In solar, wind, and run-of-river hydro, we call it the small hydros, only 40% is currently allowed under the current interpretation of the constitutional limitation. But there have been efforts by various groups, particularly the joint foreign chambers, have been pushing for the relaxation of the requirement. And I think there is some progress that have been made. Unfortunately, in terms of timing, because we are entering the election season in the Philippines, so there will be a changing of the guards in the next few months. These efforts may be stalled in the next few months, but we are still working towards the relaxation of that requirement. But maybe what bears noting here or giving attention to is the fact that in spite of that limitation, maybe what I can share is I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the feed-in tariff program in the Philippines, when it was initially rolled out, only allowed 50 megawatts of solar for the feed-in tariff program. But because of the interest, solar was actually oversubscribed, such that the government allowed 500 megawatts of solar. And that's with foreign partners, with foreign investors partnering with Filipino partners. So there is a way to get foreign investors comfortable with control, with protecting their economic interest also in these projects in spite of the limitations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mona Lisa. We have another question for Mr. Ibrahim. So could you elaborate on the implementation of corporate PPA in Malaysia in terms of vertically integrated power market? Should the contract involve utility?
Yeah, regarding this, currently we are also discussing in terms of the framework I would say that at the moment, we're still looking in terms of the particular corporate PPAs between the prosumer and the consumer is to utilize the existing grid infrastructure. And hence, currently, the total owners of the grid infrastructure is still on the utilities, is the utility as the grid owner, and hence it still involves the utilities. With regards to this, for every transactions of megawatt hour, they will be imposed certain grid charges. And currently, we are also finalizing the grid charges for this mechanism.
Okay, thank you. There's also one more question, which are what are the factors that support a successful solar development and NEM in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you also for the questions. I would say that the first success stories from the solar in Malaysia, I would say is thanks to the feed-in tariff programs. Because back then, I would say in 2010, before the feed-in tariff, the price is one of the barriers in terms of deployment of solar capacity. But after 5 years of solar projects deployment under the feed-in tariff, we have seen a rapid declination of the project cost, in which is roughly about 70 to 80% of cost reductions in 2016, and hence the reason of why the capacity from solar is taken out from feed-in tariff, since it already able to self-drive the initiative without any further incentive. So under the mechanism of large-scale solar, it enables for a larger scale of deployment, and this we are able to get a better economy of scale. And also with the contributions from the NEM, you can see that the numbers are quite huge, and currently under the NEM, we have about over than 6,000 installations under the NEM program, and this is also another factor that enables the price reductions and also the growth of local players in Malaysia. And currently, I say that in Malaysia, we have about 190 players that provide the services with regards to solar ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is for Mr. Hai. So since Austrian companies are mostly providing equipment and technology and machinery to renewable energy projects, what sectors do you see bigger potentials for Austrian companies, and how should they enter the market?
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for the question. So Vietnam is quite the market where we promote not just the generation side, but also the equipment supply side. So I think in this context of market, when we still have a lot of greenfield investment, I'm talking about earlier about a new project in the new PDPA still have some capacity for solar, for wind, with a new development under the auction mechanism in the future, then there's still opportunity for Austrian company who can provide high quality equipment and technology for new projects in Vietnam. It is still an area with high potential. The other area with potential even for operating asset, when if we have some improvement on the O&M side for existing project, then there's still opportunity for player and Austrian company to provide service to enhance the quality of the project in Vietnam. Vietnam now is working on the auction mechanism, including the battery energy storage auction mechanism to improve certain curtailment risk for operating asset. Then there is an area here for the deployment. And in terms of how to make investment in Vietnam, Vietnam allow for 100% foreign-owned company. Then Austrian investor can set up a foreign invested company in Vietnam to do this kind of technology services, to provide whether the service directly to the owner of those power plant or directly to the EPC contractor. It is flexible on the contractual arrangement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hai. Now we have a question. I think maybe Rika is the best to answer this. So why is there no more focus in other countries besides the Vietnam and Philippines for the ramp up of wind power, and what are the drivers for the huge increase in wind capacity in Vietnam?
Thank you for the question. So I think when we look at the wind fit in other countries are a little bit low compared to Vietnam and the Philippines. That's why the wind power is more attractive in those countries. Except for if the other country want to install offshore wind farms, which is a little bit expensive and quite difficult in getting the permission from the governments. So that's why it is a little bit challenges for other countries to focus on wind. But solar farms is more attractive. That is one of the challenges with the geographic features and limited land availability.
Okay, thank you. I think, sorry, we just have one more question also from Mr. Hai, which is how does Vietnam encounter the curtailment of or the overcapacity issue?
Yes, Vietnam now encounter a big issue for curtailment, where we have a lot of solar and wind projects recently developed, but the grid investment is quite slow compared to the generation. So Vietnam now trying to not just to improve the risk allocation under the PPA, particularly for when we move to auction mechanism, but also Vietnam trying to develop more framework to promote for battery energy storage and private investment in the grid. So right now the government of Vietnam working on the revised amendment law to the electricity law to give some relaxation for private sector to make investment in the grid, high voltage transmission grid, to address some of the issue. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are a few more questions, but as we have gone quite far over time, I think we will send the questions to our speakers by email, and we will get back to you by email as well. We have your name in the question box. So thank you, and I hand over to Reinhard. Reinhard, you're muted.
Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah. I would like to tell you a little bit about our next events. Yes. Well, first of all, we have also a great report just finished by my key account manager, Jennifer. It is addressed to the Austrian companies. So if you would like to receive it as Austrian company, please let us know. We would, with pleasure, share this information with you in order to give insight about the renewable energy sector in Malaysia. Second, we are organizing together with our colleagues in Bangkok, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh City, Manila, and Singapore, the Austrian Technology Days, Southeast Asia, with focusing on water, waste, and traffic management, 18th to 20th of January. It is led by our colleagues in Bangkok. If you would like to have any further information, please let us know, and we will send you the link to the P2Match website where you can register. Next, we have Austrian Showcase Green Technology together with our colleagues in Jakarta, 7th to 10th of June. Green tech in the field of recycling, plastic recycling, waste management, but also water management. And last but not least, another event related sustainable building, 8th to 11th of November. There is the trade fair ASEAN Super 8, where we should have an Austrian pavilion. And besides that, we are planning to have an Austria showcase. So if you are interested in joining one of these events, please let us know. With pleasure, we would provide you with additional information. I would like to ask now my colleague Dietmar Schwank, who is the head of Advantage Austria in Ho Chi Minh City and the commercial counselor in Vietnam, to let us know something about the events they are planning for Vietnam. Please, Dietmar, yours the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Reinhard, and good afternoon from Ho Chi Minh City. It seems that I make the last appearance here in this very intense webinar. And I'd just like to address Austrian companies with an interest in Vietnam. As you have seen, the Vietnamese market, the energy market and renewable energy market holds great potential here for Austrian companies. And many of you ask us, when are we able again to travel to Vietnam? As you know, in Vietnam, we still have entry restrictions. So we didn't put any event that we focus specifically on Vietnam only here on this list, but we'd like to invite you already for our upcoming mission for projects and development in rural areas especially. So this is true for the energy sector, but also the water sector will have a trade mission going to Ho Chi Minh City and the Mekong Delta in order to follow up with projects, but also develop new ideas and projects in these sectors, including rural infrastructure. So for anyone who is interested, I believe this will be able to take place in April, hopefully, in the coming year, depending still a bit on entry regulations. But for sure, we'll send you an invitation for that. And this would be a great opportunity for you to come to Vietnam the next time. So with this, I don't want to make it any longer. Much has been said about all the countries. Thank you to everyone, especially to participants. And I think, Reinhard, you can have the last words of goodbye for this webinar.
Thank you very much. Well, I just would like to say one word. We have also in-depth information with a global situation report, which just jumped from one to the other. For the Austrian companies, it's in German. All my colleagues in Southeast Asia have made already this report, me included, so please feel free to check it out. And last but not least, in the last slide, you see our contacts. If you need any assistance, support, or information, please feel free to contact us. Here you have Kuala Lumpur, Manila, and Ho Chi Minh City, but for sure we can contact you also with our colleagues in Bangkok, Jakarta, and Singapore. Well, I think we are quite over that, what we wanted to do today, but really it was an important and interesting topic, I would say. And at the same time, we covered not only 3 countries, but tried to make also a tour d'horizon for Southeast Asia. I'm very happy to see that nevertheless, quite a lot of people stay up to the end. I say thank you very much. Please look forward to our information. That means the link to the YouTube video that you can rewatch it or share it with colleagues and friends. And last but not least, also the presentation in a PDF format, which we will share with you in form of a link. So I would say that's it now. Thank you very much. Once again, have a nice morning and day in Austria. We here in Southeast Asia, we are already going to the end of our office day. Thank you very much. If you need anything, please let us know. Goodbye.